Here it says, J D Vance says he's prepared to become president if, God forbid, a terrible tragedy happens. The vice president said he couldn't think of better on-the-job training than his time in office. Does he know something? Are they planning to take Trump out? We do know prophecy says Trump will be assassinated, right? So when you consider his statements of such, is he preparing to replace Trump? Now, we know also that based on prophecy, that there is going to be a Seventh-day Adventist standing on the right hand of Trump. In other words, that will be his right-hand man very soon. I don't expect for Vance to remain in office much longer. And I've said this before. I've said this over the last, I think, couple of years. I've been saying this because ever since God gave the Ben Carson prophecy. Some of you, let me show you. Some of you may be unfamiliar with our playlist, but we have a playlist. You can click on playlists once you're on our channel. And we have a playlist on Ben Carson. Here, Ben Carson is VP when Trump is assassinated. Here's the playlist that we have. Multiple videos explaining that prophecy. I'm going to touch on it and then we'll move on to some other matters. But I want to bring to view what J D Vance did say this week, because I thought it was not only startling, but also prophetic in nature, because we know that Trump will be assassinated. Again, we don't wish death on any man, including President Trump, but God has given that prophecy. And somebody may say, well, based on what? Well, I would encourage you to watch the playlist. The playlist is clear. God's word is clear concerning that. And so that playlist will aid in understanding. But we know that at the beginning of the Advent movement in 1863, when the Seventh-day Adventist faith was established as an organization and it was organized, that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated at the beginning of the Advent movement, which means if the president was assassinated at the beginning of the movement, then there will be a president assassinated at the end of the movement. You see? So Trump will be assassinated based on that. And then some other things we share in that series. But as we consider this understanding with Carson, and Ben Carson being the right hand to Trump or serving as president in the future after Trump dies, I believe that it's important to note where that is coming from. And when we look at the Bible and we look at Medo-Persia, in Medo-Persia, at a time where certain laws were passed, there was at the right hand of the president or the king was a Jew, was an Israelite. And let me give you some examples. One example would be Joseph. Joseph was the prime minister or the right hand or the vice president, if you will, of Egypt at a time of calamity, at a time of famine, at a time of disaster. Who was the right hand? Was Joseph. Joseph is a Jew. He's an Israelite. That's one example. Another example would be that of, in Medo-Persia, you look at Daniel. Daniel was the right hand or the prime minister of Persia at a time when what? A law was passed, a religious law specifically was passed. A religious law saying you couldn't pray to any god but to the king. That's Daniel chapter 6. That's Daniel chapter 6. That happened in Medo-Persia, and we know that Medo-Persia is a type, an example of America. A third witness with Medo-Persia, or a third witness as one who is the right hand of the president, would be that of Esther. As Esther heard about what Haman was planning to do in killing all the Jews, and they heard the law that was being passed, Esther approached the king, and the king said what to her? I'll give you up to half my kingdom. If the king is willing to give Esther up to half her kingdom, that means that Esther would be second in command. She's the second most powerful person in the Persian Empire at that time when Ahasuerus was ruling. And that was at a time where a law was passed against the Israelites, against the Jews, because Haman's law, though it was to get rid of Mordecai, he made a law against all the Jews. Notice that the law was intended to get rid of Mordecai, but yet it affected all the Jews. Same thing happened in Daniel's day. The law was intended to get rid of Daniel, but it affected every true Christian, you see, at the time. Seeing the law was singular to get rid of one person. Even when you look at the law that Pharaoh passed to get rid of all the baby boys, that law was really just to get rid of Moses. You see, it was intended for the deliverer. When you look at Herod, Herod passed the law to kill all the baby boys in Matthew chapter 2, but that law was directed towards Christ. But it affected all the Jewish boys. You see that? So God is showing us how a law is going to be passed. It could be intended towards one individual, but it's going to affect every true Sabbath keeper. Every individual that is truly surrendered to the Lord, that is keeping God's 7-day Sabbath, which is Saturday, at a time where Sunday will be enforced as the law of the land. And when that law is passed, it will bring on these calamities, and God showing his disregard for America by walking in darkness and refusing the light of the Bible that says the Sabbath is the true day of worship. And this is why the Lord will allow the day to go dark. He will allow the moon to be turned to blood. He will allow the White House to be destroyed. Why? Because it will be the White House that will bring in Sunday observance. So it's a judgment by God on America. So we have Joseph as one witness. We have Daniel as a second witness. We have Esther as a third witness. And then your fourth witness would be that of Nehemiah. Nehemiah was the cupbearer at a time where Jerusalem was destroyed. Jerusalem was in ruins, and the temple or the wall needed to be rebuilt. So you're seeing Nehemiah the cupbearer, meaning if you're the cupbearer, you're always right next to the king. You're bearing his cup. You see? So Nehemiah would be the fourth witness, and Nehemiah was in Medo-Persia, which gives us 3 witnesses with Medo-Persia alone that show that there was a Jew, there was an Israelite at the right hand of the king. You see that? Nehemiah, Esther, and Daniel were all Jews. They were all Israelites, and each of them were the right hand of the king at a time of a major event, at a time of a major law being passed, at a time of calamity and ruins of Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is about to be ruined, modern day Jerusalem, in the fact that probation is about to close for Seventh-day Adventists. And when that ruin happens, and many die on the coming dark day, we can expect near to that time for Ben Carson to be the right hand of President Trump, or be in a position to take over after Trump is assassinated, is what I expect. So look for Carson to move up in the ranks.